So one of the things, I mean, there are a number of things I wanted to do today, but actually this one was triggered yesterday. Let me just, when I was talking to Michael, um, the decision exercise. One of the things that I want to do is online here to put up various exercises to show some of the more important things that we can do. And one of the most important exercises is called the decision exercise. I'm going to pull up what Mr. Gurdjieff says about it. Very briefly, what I found in, I keep on losing myself. What I found in the meeting notes, G.I. Gurdjieff, Paris meetings, 1943. So, I've titled it Decided in This Special State. And I call it the essence of the decision exercise because that's what it is. So he says first, and he's talking to someone. This is a transcript of a meeting where he was giving this advice to one of his students in Paris during the Second World War under Nazi occupation. First, you must learn to relax. Become quiet. Second, once that is done, think and give yourself the task of making a program to accomplish what you have decided to do. Of course, you will lose this state and you will again become the slave of your associations. But what you decided in this special state, take it as a task, as a service. Third, you must never believe in yourself in your ordinary state. You justify yourself. You believe in yourself, but you must not. You must not forget how you decided on your program, what state you were in. This is what you need. These three things are absolutely necessary. I can only answer you this way. So the three things: first, the relaxation. The second, to think and give yourself a task, to make a program. And third, to not believe yourself in your ordinary state and to not allow your ordinary state to justify why you can't do it or whatever. Whoops, I don't know how I jumped over here, but this is where I'm going next. Just give me 1 second. Okay. The essence of George Gurdjieff's decision exercise. Again, this is my title. This comes from Fritz Peters' book, Balanced Man. So it's one of the books that he wrote in the 70s where he reflected back on his experience with Mr. Gurdjieff. Now, Fritz Peters was the nephew of Margaret Anderson. And Margaret Anderson and her partner ran a magazine called The Little Review. They were actually charged with the obscenity back in, I think it was 1919, because they published James Joyce's book Ulysses in serial form in their magazine. And so they were part of the New York avant-garde. They moved to Paris, the whole writer circle. Jane Heap was a remarkable person. She tried to approach Ouspensky and ask if she could join his group. And Ouspensky's response was, "We don't take that kind of person," because Jane Heap was a lesbian. And when she was in Paris, she met Mr. Gurdjieff, and he took her in, and he said that she came from a different planet. There was something extraordinary about Jane Heap and her understanding. And he eventually told her to set up a group in England. She had a group in Paris, another one in England. She was in direct contact with Mr. Gurdjieff. But Fritz Peters' parents divorced, and Fritz Peters' mother was somewhat emotionally unstable, and she had to go to a sanatorium, so to speak, for her mental health. And so Margaret Anderson, her sister, adopted Fritz Peters. And so Margaret Anderson and Jane Heap, when Fritz Peters was 12, and his brother, it was a little Tom Peters was a little older, they got dumped at Mr. Gurdjieff's Prieuré in Fontainebleau in Quebec, in Paris. And so he recounted his experiences as a boy, and he knew Mr. Gurdjieff right up until the end of the Second World War, so right up until adulthood. And his one of the most important books, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best books on the teachings, is Fritz Peters' Boyhood with Gurdjieff. And it's actually being combined with another book, and it's now called Fritz Peters' My Journey with a Mystic. And then he wrote a third book called, the one that I'm quoting from here, Balanced Man. And Mr. Gurdjieff at one point said to Fritz Peters, you know, the other people who came learned me through their head, but I am underneath your skin, because Fritz Peters lived at the Prieuré as a boy. So this is him reflecting, I don't know how many years later. How can we begin to destroy the habit patterns which have been acquired through our lifetime and try to replace them with intentionally useful and harmonious habits? How do we become dead to what has become for you your ordinary life? It involves a kind of punishing effort that could almost be called brute force and mercilessness. The despair that some people experience in the emptiness of their lives can only be altered by a discipline that is, in the proper sense of that word, ruthless. One exercise that may sound simple will serve as a good demonstration of the way our weaknesses can and do prevent us from ever beginning work. So here's the exercise. Make a program for yourself every day. Make it thoroughly, trying not to be over ambitious, and also avoiding the trap of not giving yourself enough to do for that day. Write it down, hour by hour, trying to estimate thoughtfully exactly what you will be able to accomplish in a given period of time. Depending on one's outer life circumstances, it is important to allow for whatever interruptions your lifestyle or your profession may impose on you in any given period of time. A telephone call, for example, can disrupt an entire day unless you are determined to be in control of the call and the caller. It is a good idea to allow some free time to help with just such contingencies as the telephone, unexpected interruptions, and the like. At the end of the day, review in detail exactly what you did do as opposed to what you set out to do. And don't be depressed by results. Depression is just another form of letting one's emotions get the upper hand. But punish yourself for the things you did not accomplish and then forget it. How punish yourself? Make the punishment fit the crime. If you are a smoker, do not allow yourself that cigarette with your coffee after dinner. If you drink, skip the evening cocktail, but do these things consciously in the knowledge that you are giving up these small but necessary pleasures because you have failed in something you set out to do. Punishing yourself this way may sound childish and even idiotic, but remember that what you are dealing with, that mechanism that is you, is like a child who has acquired messy habits and who behaves in general completely unconsciously. Children are, or at least should be, punished for infractions of the general rules of life which make life bearable among other human beings. In this case, you are not the child. The exercise can be boring and seem useless, and it is important not to expect results. Expect what you get and learn how difficult it is to discipline the machine. It may not sound very esoteric or occult to perform this sort of seemingly mundane exercise, but it will do a great deal more for the eventual discipline of the body, not to mention the emotions and the mind, than any amount of prayer or meditation. Now, I'm just going to point out this is a very complex, so to speak, form of it. Because he says, hour by hour, list things that you should do throughout the day. Sometimes Mr. Gurdjieff gave his students the will task of, at 10 o'clock, remember yourself. At 11 o'clock, remember yourself. At 12 o'clock, remember yourself. He says anyone can remember themselves. Throughout the day, the state can come and it can go, but when you make a conscious decision to do things at a certain time, you add an element of much greater discipline to what you are doing. And then let me get the final one. And the other thing I should say is that according to J.G. Bennett, or according to the person who ran the group that I was in, J.G. Bennett said that Mr. Gurdjieff was actually taught this exercise by his father. So it was something he learned as a boy to do. So this is the decision exercise as taught by J.G. Bennett. Number 1, during the day, notice something that needs to be done, something that takes not more than 10 minutes. Over time, you can take on larger tasks depending on the growth of your contact to the higher will. See the elements of the things you need to do, the task. Like a broom, hammer, whatever, and make sure these are available and how they will be set out. Do not do anything involving someone else. Do not let anyone else know what you are doing, that it is a special task. Do mundane things consciously, 1 a day if yes. So 2, after the morning sitting, ask what will be done. Answer yourself. 3, ask why this will be done. Answer. 4, visualize the task. 5, visualize and sense the task. 6, ask if it will be done and get a sense from above as to if it ought to be done. Receive the answer and do not do it if the answer is no. 7, do it with self-remembering as soon as you can before midnight. And if you remember when in bed at night, get up and do it. Repeat the whole thing each day. Review how the exercise went before falling asleep. This exercise strengthens our ability, our relationship with the will. Do it again if not good enough. Building super effort and ability. So as you notice, there's a number of different elements. The Fritz Peters one is a little complex. The J.G. Bennett one is a little complex. Basically, when we're in the meditative state, when we're in the collected state, which I've talked about, that's, where we keep our atmosphere still and tranquil and undisturbed, particularly in the mornings. If, they recommend that we sit, try to get into the collected state, keep our atmosphere within ourselves, really try to sense and inhabit our body really do our best to self-remember. So to be aware of what comes in our visual field in an impartial way, to be impartially aware of sounds, of smells, of tastes, to be impartially aware of our body and perhaps our feelings in a very tranquil, still state. And then think about something that we want to do, to make a decision to do that. And then in that state, Bennett talked about the higher will, but Mr. Gurdjieff didn't. But in that state, we are accessing a different level of our being, and to think of something that we want to do. It could be as simple as reaching for door handles with our left hand, or putting our pants on with our left foot in, if we normally do it with our right foot. It can get a bit more complex depending on what you want to do. Fritz Peters recommended setting up a number of things throughout the day. And then you ask, Bennett made it seem like asking higher. It's really more like asking inwards, asking into the depth of your being. Is this an appropriate task? Quite often we set tasks and we set things that are a little too extraordinary or undoable or that are inappropriate. So to reflect at that deeper level, if this is an appropriate task, and then if we get a yes, to visualize ourselves performing the task. So let's say your task is, whenever you come home, you're going to open the door handle with your non-dominant hand. Let's say your left hand. So you first then visualize that, and then you visualize it and use your sensory memory. So to imagine reaching out with your arm, opening the door handle. In the Bennett one, they said at midnight or as you're going to bed, review it, and then get up, and if you haven't done it, go and do it. That might not be appropriate. Let's say that when you're at work and you're sitting in your chair, you want to do something specific at work. You can't get up and go do that. What I would recommend would be, if you at the end of the day realize that you didn't perform your task, in the collected state, think of something that you could do. I know that Mr. Gurdjieff quite often told his students when they failed to perform something to stand and hold your arms out wide for at least 7 minutes. You will find that the strain and the tension of holding them out at your arms, if you're not used to it, can be something that will take its toll on you. This is also an exercise that he gave his students. He mentioned once that one of his students could hold his arms out for 2 hours, but it didn't do anything for him because he didn't do it and understand it in the right way. But that's a form of punishment. Fritz Peters talked about denying yourself something that you liked. That cigarette if you're a smoker, that drink at the end of the day if you're a drinker. I'm not a smoker or a drinker. The one that I used to do regularly was the arms out if you forget to do it. Basically, we're conditioning our lower self. We're conditioning our mechanical self. So these are, the decision exercise is a way to become more conscious. I'll post all of those on the Facebook meeting group so that you can read them yourself. Any comments? Any questions?
I have a comment or maybe a question. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
This matches up perfectly with what I've been doing this week. Is you had mentioned last week that the 60 bones, do I have that number right?
Yeah, 60 bone exercise.
The 60 bone exercise is something that can be good to do in the morning.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying, I guess, to do that in the morning, first thing when I wake up. And I've found that it's actually really hard for me. I'll work through like a hand or even just 3 or 4 fingers. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, I catch myself in the middle of some story about my day, or maybe
Yeah.
I fell asleep, I'm having some dream. And so I start over, and maybe I finish a hand and a half, and it just continues on like that. And it continues on it happened that way
Yeah.
almost every time I did it in the morning. And I guess it's, now I didn't do it in a relaxed, I didn't come to that decision in a relaxed state. So that's a little different from what you're saying,
Yeah.
but that showed me how easily my mind, drifts around, and that my decision to do this in the morning didn't really carry any weight with what actually happened.
Yeah.
And when I've read the Peters book, and I've heard some things of the decision exercise, and I always wondered if it was something that was more meant to show our inability to do, our mechanicality, than it is something that we should push ourselves to achieve at.
It's
Maybe.
it's
Go
both.
ahead. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the more we practice it, the more we develop will. And I know what you mean about the bones exercise, because I do that, and mostly I do it. But every now and again, it's like there I have, and something has come in my mind and taken me away from it. One way to counter that is to do something such as sit in a chair or whatever. Mr. Gurdjieff, talked about the power of sitting in a slightly awkward or at least unnatural position to help us remember tasks that we're doing. So, perhaps just to get up and sit sort of on the edge of a chair with your hands on your knees, and then do it in that state, maybe leaning slightly forward or something. Whatever you need to do in order to make sure that you do it. For myself, what I've started to, the tasks that I've been doing in the last week are, I've noticed that I get into repetitive thoughts. And I've done this all my whole life. I rehearse conversations. And I rehearse the conversation, and I rehearse the conversation. And then when I'm actually having the conversation, it never goes like I rehearse it. This is just in a way in my head brain that I waste energy. And now when I catch myself rehearsing a conversation, I do this, the 12 joint exercise. And I make sure I do that 3 times. So sources of divine rejoicings, revolts, and sufferings, direct your actions upon us. And I go through it 3 times. And I do it in the moment as a form of punishment. So I don't continually have, I've got to meet someone. So I've got to make sure I say these things. And I never follow my internal script. I mean, actually, I figure what I say is actually appropriate in the moment, but the idea of rehearsing it, maybe rehearse it once, maybe think through it twice, try to collect certain points I want to say, but looping around and around and around, it's one of the ways that I've noticed I waste my energy. So I just do that sources exercise 3 times, because I can do it when I'm walking, when I'm moving, or whatever. So that's a way that I sort of, it's not really a punishment for myself, but it's a way of saying, no, stop that. Yeah.
Okay.
But the bone exercise, if you have difficulty, sit.
I don't know if I would have difficulty if I was sitting. That sounds, once I get out of bed, then I'm, the mind state shifts, and it's, well, I'll have to try it, but the guess is it would be much less of a challenge.
Yeah.
I can come up with something else.
Yeah. Or, maybe, cross your legs in an awkward fashion in bed, something that brings a little bit of tension into your body that reminds you, or I don't know, or just keep at it. Just keep at it until you can do it. And, to bring that, maybe wait an hour before you have your first coffee or something if you don't do it properly. The physical body, and not just the physical body, but the mechanical self. the self in world 48 needs to be disciplined. It needs to be trained. Um, Guido, any comments yourself?
Uh, this kinds of tries, like the Simon, James Simon says, learn how to try, or at least try, because it's seconds
Yeah.
that you can get out of the taste, out of the flavor of the work.
Yeah.
And you can do it all the time. It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do it all the time.
Yeah.
You have to try all the time, harder and harder and harder. Not to forget yourself.
Yeah.
Just try to remember yourself.
Yeah. Well,
As, as,
Mr. Gurdjieff did say you should only spend a third of your time, and this is not for new students, not even this, but you should only spend a third of your time doing this kind of inner work, and then the rest of the time, he said, you just send it to the devil. And and he said that even I mean, when people say, they talk about, I'm a conscious man, I'm awake, and they claim to be awake, 100% of the time. I've got a BS meter that goes off because of what Mr. Gurdjieff said. He said that, when he did work, like, with antiques and appraisal and stuff like that, he would be half asleep. And when he wanted to go to sleep, and he's talking about waking sleep, he would go to the movie theater. Apparently, when he was in Taliesin, Frank Lloyd Wright's retreat, the famous architect, because Frank Lloyd Wright's wife was Oliviana Lloyd Wright, who was a student of Mr. Gurdjieff, followed him out of Tbilisi into Paris and everything, and then ultimately somewhere along the way she met and married Frank Lloyd Wright. And there was a movie theater in that town, and Mr. Gurdjieff apparently loved to go to it, and he would go and just enter that state of waking sleep. So he wasn't conscious 24 hours a day, or at least while he was awake. He said that most people just spend their lives in the lower two states of consciousness, but even someone who is capable of being fully conscious will experience all four states throughout their day. They will go up through them and come down through them. And so even the most awake person isn't awake for their entire day when they are awake. They have their moments where the thoughts come and different things come, but they have the will and they've got the strength of being that when they need to be, they are. So, and it's something that we work on. It's something that we strive towards. So you can't be conscious all the time. You can't be doing inner work all the time. But perhaps you can be conscious. Perhaps you can remember yourself at 10 a.m., at 11 a.m., and at noon. And you could set yourself that will task to become aware those 3 times. And if you start to set tasks like that, you begin to do them. You're looking at your watch or whatever, and you go, oh, it's 9:45, and there's a part of you that's priming, and then suddenly you start to develop that sense and that awareness of time, and you find yourself, looking at your watch, and it's like 2 minutes to 10, and you start, so that you're doing it at 10, and then it's after 10 and you let it go, and then you do it at 11 and you do it at 12, and if you don't do it, you set yourself some kind of punishment. And this is punishing the mechanical, the lower self. So just the punishment is important. Setting the state in, let me get back to Mr. Gurdjieff's rendition. Oops. Just give me 1 second. So, first you must learn to relax, to become quiet. This is the collected state exercise, keeping your atmosphere tranquil, keeping your atmosphere still. Second, once that is done, give yourself the task of making a program to accomplish what you have decided to do. And then, of course, you will lose this state. You will again become the slave of your associations. But what you decided in this special state, take as a task, as a service. And then third, you must never believe yourself in your ordinary state. So you must not forget, the state that you are in. And he doesn't really include the punishment here, but from what I understand and from what I've experienced, the punishment, something simple, something just like a slap on your wrist or whatever, is a very good thing. At any rate, let's just bring our awareness back to our body. Bring your awareness back to your breath, back to your breathing, and become aware of the air as it flows in through your nose, the bridge of your nose, your nasal cavity, back of mouth, throat, vocal cords, right down into your lungs, and then back out again. Consciously breathing in and breathing out at your own natural pace, your own natural rhythm. And let's quickly just try to do your best to relax your body. So starting with your head, just relax your forehead, your eyebrows. Just bring a degree of relaxation into your eyes, your nose, the muscles in your face and cheeks, relaxing your lips, the inside of your mouth, your tongue, the muscles in your chin, your jaw, the muscles connected to your jaw, relaxing your throat, your neck, your shoulders, and then relaxing your chest. So your pectoral major and minor muscles, the intercostal muscles between your lungs, between your ribs and your lungs, moving down, relaxing your abdominal muscles, your abdomen down into your lower pelvis. And then go to your upper back and shoulder blades and relax your upper back, your middle back, your lower back. Bring it down into your buttocks and hips. And then return your attention to your right arm, your right upper arm, and relax that, your right lower arm. And then relax your right hand and fingers. Then your left upper arm, and then relax your left lower arm, your left hand and fingers. And then relax your right upper leg, your right lower leg, your right feet and toes, and then your left upper leg, left lower leg, left feet and toes. And then with your breath, bring your awareness to the top of your head, and as you breathe out, relax your whole body right down to the tips of your toes. And then breathe into the top of your head and relax your whole body again down to the tips of your toes. And let's do this a third time. Breathing into the top of your head and then just relaxing your whole body down to the tips of your toes. And then let's move through the 60-point J.G. Bennett exercise. So just become aware, breathing in awareness and then breathing out tension to the right side of your forehead, your right eye, the right side of your nose and face, your right ear and the muscles in the right side of your head, the right side of your mouth and jaw, the right side of your throat and neck, your right shoulder, your right upper arm, your right lower arm, And I'm truncating this slightly because I'm going to do another exercise after. So your right hand, the right side of your chest, the right side of your solar plexus and midriff, the right side of your lower abdomen, your right shoulder blade and upper back, your right middle back, your right lower back, your right buttock and hip, your right upper leg, your right lower leg, your right foot, your left foot, your left lower leg, your left upper leg, your left hip and buttock, the left side of your lower back, the left side of your middle back, the left side of your upper back and left shoulder blade, your left hand, your left lower arm, your left upper arm, your left shoulder, the left side of your throat and neck, the left side of your jaw and mouth, the muscles in the left side of your head and your left ear, the left side of your face and nose, the left side of your forehead. And then I'm adapting this slightly. I want you to just breathe naturally. And in a moment, when I tell you to, as you breathe in, I want you to pull your awareness up the left side of your body. And as you breathe out, send it down the right side of your body. Breathing in up the left from your left foot up to the top side of your left head, and then breathing out down the right side. Just do this for a couple of breaths so that you loop up and then back down, and then looping up and back down, and looping up and back down with your in-breath and out-breath. Now, the next part, there are prayers that can go along with this. I'm not going to say the prayers. I'm going to actually put the compilation exercise. I will put it when I post this video. For people who watch this video later, there will be a 30-minute exercise that will go through the various prayers of what I'm going to do next. But I would like you to bring your awareness to the bones in your hands, fingers, feet, and toes. And I'm just going to show, we've got a bone from the tip to the first digit, for instance, of the thumb, a bone from the thumb into the palm, and then there's a bone inside. And the top part of our fingers are actually phalanges. They aren't bones, but we have two bones, and then the third bone goes right into the palm. So the third bones end about here in the palms, and we also have the same within our feet. So when I talk about the 3 bones, the third one is deep in our palm. So become aware of the 3 bones in your right thumb. And if you know the prayer, you can say the prayer. The 3 bones in your right index finger. The 3 bones in your right middle finger. The 3 bones in your right fourth finger. The 3 bones in your right baby finger. And then moving down to your left foot, the 3 bones in your left baby toe. The 3 bones in your left fourth toe. The 3 bones in your left middle toe. The 3 bones in your left second toe. The 3 bones in your left big toe. And then moving to your right foot, the 3 bones in your right big toe. The 3 bones in your right second toe. The 3 bones in your right middle toe. The 3 bones in your right fourth toe. The 3 bones in your right baby toe. And then moving up to your left hand, become aware of the 3 bones in your left baby finger. The 3 bones in your left fourth finger. The 3 bones in your left middle finger. The 3 bones in your left index finger. And the 3 bones in your left thumb. Now the 3 bones, 5 digits, that's 15 bones per hand or foot, 60 bone exercise. So for those who are watching later on YouTube, when Ian was talking about the 60 bone exercise, this is the 60 bone exercise. I'm going to now go through the 12 joint exercise. This was the one that I was talking about, that when I caught myself rehearsing a conversation, I would stop and I would go through this one 3 times. I'm only going to do it once. There are 2 prayers that can be associated with this. I will post a link to an MP3 recording that I made last week that will go through this with one of the prayers. So just bring your awareness to the joint of your right wrist, your right elbow, your right shoulder, your left hip, your left knee, your left lower leg, or your left ankle, your right ankle, your right knee, your right hip, your left shoulder, your left elbow, your left wrist. And then become aware of the collected state. Represent to yourself that you are surrounded by an atmosphere that's perhaps a meter, meter and a half, 4, 5.5 feet. Just as the earth has an atmosphere, we also have an atmosphere. And our atmosphere gets dispersed through our thoughts. If we think of our mother and she's far away, our atmosphere will go towards her. If we get really upset emotionally, our atmosphere can be dispersed. If we get caught up in, certain physical things, our atmosphere can be dispersed. So there are these elements, these layers of our atmosphere. There's a head-brain dimension. So this is the words and pictures, thoughts and associations. There's a body-brain dimension. This is our sensations. A feeling brain dimension, our feelings. So just keep your atmosphere calm. Keep your atmosphere collected. This calm, collected state, keeping your atmosphere still, imagining perhaps it's like a tranquil pond without any movement, still, quiet, calm. This is the collected state that we should be making our decisions in when we do the decision exercise. We should do some kind of relaxation exercise, some kind of inner work, and get ourselves into the collected state so that we can then set some kind of a will task for ourselves, some kind of a decision to do something that will require our conscious awareness, that will require a higher will, something deeper, more profound in ourselves to come into play. Now, something else that's important that I've gone through in many of the earlier videos is breathing. There's a way of consciously breathing in the active elements in the air that we really need for higher work. Mr. Gurdjieff said, we need a tiny bit of gold to make gold. This is an old alchemical law. And alchemy is really our own transformation. And if you don't have certain higher substances within yourself, you won't be able to do a lot. So this is also essential in a respect for the decision exercise, because in the decision exercise, we want to step into a higher state. We want to momentarily become more conscious. And if we don't have the active element already within us, we can't become more conscious. And one of the ways, there are other ways, but this is the easiest way and the most profound way, is to put ourselves in the collected state, to get ourselves very calm, to have our atmosphere very calm, to feel very tranquil, and then to become conscious of our breath, to become conscious of our breathing. And as we breathe in, we represent to ourselves, we imagine, that is, it's a head-brain activity. We imagine breathing in higher particles, active elements in the air we breathe. We imagine, represent to ourselves that we are breathing them in. And then as we breathe in, we become aware of our lungs inflating, of our ribs, our lungs expanding. This is the body brain. And then as we breathe in, if we can try to smile with our eyes, if we can try to bring a little smile to our face, if we can represent a degree of joy, a degree of a higher emotion, we involve the body brain. So by representing and imagining that we're breathing in the active elements, we are invoking and using our head brain by becoming aware of the sensation of our lungs expanding, bringing the air in, we are involving our body brain. And then by particularly, especially if you can smile with the eyes, there's a ribbon-like muscle that goes around the eyes. It's involved in squinting. So when we squint, the orbicularis oculi, the little circle eye muscle, it's involved in squinting. If you can smile with your eyes, particularly with this muscle, you will automatically bring a tiny degree of joy into the process. 10% of the population can do this automatically. The other 90% of the population have to learn how to smile with their eyes. And there are exercises like putting a book or something and looking into a mirror and getting to the point where you can see yourself smiling with your eyes. But to somehow bring an element of joy or delight. I love the word delight, D-E, of in French and other languages, and light. Delight, of light, some joy. So breathe in with all three brains, representing breathing in the active element, sensing your lungs, and perhaps smiling with your eyes. And then as you breathe out, again with all three brains, imagine breathing out a gray fog, getting rid of waste products, representing this to your head brain, the imagination of the gray fog, sensing your lungs deflating, pushing the air out, and again, perhaps with that smile in your eyes, imagine, sense, feel that something within the air remains within yourself. So breathing in with all three brains, and then as you breathe out, imagine something remains within yourself. And as Mr. Gurdjieff said, where it goes, how it goes, that's its own business. We don't worry about that part. We just represent breathing in the active elements to ourselves, sensing our lungs inflating, trying to bring that joy in. And then as we breathe out, representing with our head brain a gray, foggy waste, sensing our lungs expelling the air, and that feeling, that joy, and imagining something remains. Consciously breathing in, and then as we breathe out, imagine something remains. And the something that remains are these active elements. They are these higher substances that we need for our inner work. And to put ourselves in the collected state, to quieten ourselves down, to do inner work, will allow us to enter into the state where we can digest and bring these elements into ourselves. We cannot breathe these active elements into ourselves if we are disturbed, if we are agitated, if our atmosphere is not tranquil, if we're upset at someone, or we're in a state of identification or whatever. We need to do it when we're in this collected state, when we've relaxed our body. It's a good idea to do it towards the end of any kind of inner work you may have done. It's a good idea to do inner work in the morning. So again, represent to yourself that you are surrounded by an atmosphere, a meter, meter and a half, 4 to 5.5 feet perhaps. Imagine this atmosphere still, tranquil, that the inner work that we did, the going down the one side of the body, up the other, the 60 bone hands and feet exercise, the 12 joint exercise. Imagine that's part of our atmosphere. Our atmosphere is still and calm. And the way we finish the collected state atmosphere is we breathe the atmosphere in, we suck it in. So I'm going to count from 1 to 3, and when I get to 3, just suck it in. And as you suck it in, imagine that you are breathing the active elements you created through this inner work. And then as you breathe out, represent and imagine that these higher active elements stay within yourself. So imagine this atmosphere around you, tranquil, still, calm, and then 1, 2, 3, suck it in. And then as you breathe out, imagine it stays within you. And all kind of inner work like this, it's always good to say, may the results of this exercise, so repeat that in your mind, may the results of this exercise be transubstantiated in me. For my being. And then, Mr. Gurdjieff said, whenever we do work like this, it's always good to just try to remain in a tranquil, collected state for at least 10 to 15 minutes and not just rush out. So, for instance, if you do some kind of inner work in the morning, as soon as you finish, you don't just rush out and catch the bus or jump in your car or whatever. He says that what we want are these emanations that we created during this inner work to settle within us and to grow our inner being. This is all about growing our being. It's about developing our higher bodies. So last week, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about personality and essence. There are aspects of the teachings. So far, I've really been focusing a lot on the inner work. And this is also inner work. Mr. Gurdjieff said that there are two dimensions of ourself. One is actually a higher aspect of ourself. Our essence is higher than our personality. And he defined personality as is what is not our own, whereas our essence is what is our own. Personality comes through education. There are people out there who are pure personality. They are pure, not pure, but almost pure, what is not their own. And there's very little, they've taken very little time to nurture and grow what is themselves. There are certain professions, for instance, that really try to train their people to become personality. You ask someone, who they are, and if they say, doctors, lawyers, police officers, particularly, those are very, very personality-oriented professions. People are taught to think, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a policeman, when in truth, we are none of these things. There's something different, something truer, something more essential about who we are. And years ago, when I was working through this idea myself, I used to do these thought experiments. Rather than, a twin, I would imagine that at birth, I was cloned. And one of my clones lived the life I had lived up until that point, and the other clone had lived a different life. Now, for me, this was a little bit easier in one respect because my parents were South African. All my grandparents are buried in South Africa. 3 of them were born there. I was born in Africa. When I was 2.5, my dad moved to England, and when I was 5, we moved to Canada. So I could imagine myself having gone back to where my parents were born, Cape Town, where my cousins, my uncles, I could imagine a life that I would have had there as opposed to the life that I did have. And then I could imagine, Alan, African Alan and Canadian Alan. And in essence, the part that's who I am would have been the same. But the other things, perhaps my political views, perhaps my education, my connection to people, various things would have been completely different. So the difference is my personality. It's what I absorbed through my education, what I absorbed through the world that's not my own. I could even take it one step further and imagine that my clone was raised in a different culture with a different language halfway around the world. And so what would be the same within me would be my essence. What would be different would be my personality. So our language is not our own. We learned our language. Now, language is interesting because there is an actual structure, some kind of tree within us, some kind of synaptic or syntactic structure in us that language sort of clusters on and develops. So there's actually a part of my language that is more essential, but the words, the phrases, the phonemes, the sounds are not my own. There's a certain element of my language that is my own. The language is subject, verb, object. It's got sort of the law of three. There's a grammatical structure, a way of absorbing language that falls in a certain way on certain internal structures within ourselves, which are natural and native. Another way I thought of this is imagine that we are gardens and that there are plants that are native to the garden. And then there are seeds that flow in over the fence and land in the garden, and they grow in the garden. Those seeds that come from outside represent our personality. The seeds that are naturally a part of the garden represent our essence. Now it gets a little bit more complex than what I've been saying, because it's not that personality is bad, that personality is evil. Mr. Gurdjieff said we need the parallel development of our personality and our essence. That, for instance, people who live in the country, their essence is more fully developed. But he said, if the essence outgrows the personality, that leads to an imbalance. And if the personality, which most often happens in our world, we're taught not to be who we really are at the essential level. When our personality grows beyond and outpaces our essence, it also leads to an imbalance. We want to grow them both. The only way you can understand me is you've learned English. You've learned these words. The only way we can communicate is through the personality. That's where we connect with other people. So personality is not evil. It's not something that we have to get rid of. Unfortunately, it's active. And, we have active, passive, positive, negative. And our essence should be more active and our personality more passive. Now, in terms of the metaphors that I've used, there's also something that's a little bit of a distortion, because like the garden, like the native seeds, we can cultivate our essence. And so, me as opposed to African me, I have cultivated my essence, particularly in Canada, particularly since I've been involved in the Gurdjieff work in these teachings. I have been deliberately doing my best to cultivate my essence. Perhaps if I had stayed there, my personality might have overwhelmed me. I might not have stepped on the mystical path. I might not have had those childhood experiences that were necessary for me to develop a magnetic center and become who I am. So my personality may have overtaken myself, and my essence could have stayed in a very primitive fashion. So what we want to do is we want to, in terms of active and passive, we want our personality to become more passive, but we also want to cultivate our essence. Now, Mr. Gurdjieff talked about some qualities of our essence. And these qualities, they get misrepresented, they get misunderstood, they get abused and taken away. But he talked about things such as love, hope, and faith. These are seedlings that we should be cultivating from within. Also, another one is conscience. So this gives you some kind of an idea of the quality or what essence is sort of like. So essence isn't the words. It isn't the sort of outer structure. I was also actually lucky in another respect, because I realized how ephemeral things are. I was born in a country. I was actually born in the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. That's what my birth certificate says. The country I was born in no longer exists. It's actually now 3 countries. So on my passport, it says I was born in Zambia, but Zambia did not exist when I was born. That's a human invention. It doesn't exist. It only exists in the human mind. To the lions, to the antelope, to whatever that would cross the borders, they wouldn't see the border. I went to a high school in Toronto, in Etobicoke, in the northwest of Toronto, that no longer exists. The building's still there. It's still a high school, but it's not my high school. It lasted for 7 years, and then it was a state school, so it was a public school, and they sold it to the Catholic School Board. So it's now a Catholic school. So the physical structure is still there, but it's got a completely different name, completely different history. You'd walk into it now and you see pictures of students and whatever. They're all students who went to the Catholic school. It's like the school that I went to was in that building, but it no longer exists. And personality, a lot of what personality is things that we imagine. I like to use, a squirrel test, or I used to call it the tulip test because my daughter had a rabbit called Tulip. If an animal sees it and if an animal can recognize it, there's a reality to it. But there are so many things that only exist in the mind of human beings and nowhere else in this entire universe. That magical border just south of where I am, a few miles, right down at the bottom of Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes. There's this imaginary line that runs in the very middle of the lake. And on this side, it's Canada, and on that side, it's America. The fish that swim across that border don't see that border. That's a collective hallucination. It's an unreality. So to say I'm a Canadian is to empower my personality. I'm not a Canadian. I have a Canadian passport. I live in Canada. I speak with a Canadian accent, but that's part of my personality. That is something that's really alien to my true essential nature, to who I really am. There are so many things. If we begin to think about our life, what is real about us? What isn't real? I live in Toronto. Toronto is not real. Toronto is a name, it's a collective hallucination. But there are roads here, there are sewers, there are electrical wires, there are objective things that really exist that we can look at, and we can talk about, a cluster of roads and buildings and whatever. So there is something that is real here. But a lot of what we project onto it, a lot of what we think is not real. It's alien, it's false. So these things are all wrapped up in personality. Personality is what is not us, what is not real in terms of ourself. It's like this imposed reality. And personality is very much something that exists in our head brain. It exists in our imagination. So these people, who think that they're doctors or think that they're lawyers, they've got the pieces of paper, everyone tells them that, think they're police officers. It's up here. Something within those professions grows within them as they practice those professions. There are essential qualities that they develop. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. Our essence can be bad. It's not the pure good phenomenon that it's made out to be by some people in the teachings. This is why I say In Search of the Miraculous or Fragments of an Unknown Teaching by P.D. Uspensky is the best introductory book to the teachings, but he makes the essence seem like promised land, and it isn't. The essence can have a certain degree of darkness and warped and various different things with it. So first, we learn to distinguish between what is not us, between our personality, and it's a lot of the head brain ideas and thoughts, and what is essential to us, what is true of us. And when you think of something like love, hope, faith, conscience, it gives you an indication of what is true within us. But we have to also cultivate our essence, because our essence can grow in the wrong way. It can be limited. It can be malnourished. It can be malformed. So our essence isn't necessarily good. It can be. And here, Catherine Hume, in her notes that she made called Conversations with Gurdjieff, she said that Mr. Gurdjieff told her that it's not really our essence. So what, as I shouldn't be identified with my body, it's not my body. My body is made of the earth. It's made of the elements of the earth, the iron and the minerals. And without feeding and without taking those elements, I would not have a body. I would die. So to not be identified with our body, he told her that it's not our essence. It's really human essence. So if we can imagine a lake, like Lake Ontario, and taking a drop out of the lake, and then the drop will eventually return to the lake, but taking a drop out of the lake, and we are, and our essential, our self at the level of essence is like that drop, and then we can nurture it and cultivate it. But he also said we should not become identified with our essence. And to get a little complex, Mr. Gurdjieff talked about, levels of transformation, levels of energy. Personality is a part of ourself in World 48, which is a very mechanical, habitual, automatic energy. Essence is ourself in World 24, so it's under half the laws. It's twice as intelligent, twice as refined, twice as vibrant as our personality. So it stands a whole order or level above our personality. And the level of essence, World 24, is the level of mindful awareness. So one way we grow this aspect is to become aware, mindful of our breathing, to become aware of our body, to become aware of the 60 bones or the 12 joints or whatever. That's working and developing ourselves at that level. But there's a level higher, World 12, the real I, the witness, the observer. That's what we want to awaken. That is truly who we are at a deeper level. And for most people, it's like they're just a single cell, and we can grow a much bigger dimension of ourselves at that level. And that level is beyond identification. It's beyond the misuse of certain energies. And so when we open and develop that level, we begin to become who we really are. So we have personality, we have essence, and then we have the real I. and it's important to understand them as different levels, different orders of our being, different levels of energy, different levels of materiality, and to begin working with them. So in the beginning of the work, to really ask yourself, what makes up me? What is real in me? If I was, cloned at birth and halfway around the world with a different language and culture, well, language, culture. What else would be different about me? Probably my education, the schools I went to, perhaps my understanding of relationships, if it was a very different culture. To begin to think about the things that we've absorbed from the world in order to help us interact with the world and connect with other people. Because without personality, without language, without words, we would just be we would live in isolation. We wouldn't develop, we wouldn't connect, we wouldn't have society and culture and social interactions. What is native to myself? And then to learn how to make the personality passive, and to realize a lot of what we think of ourselves are really illusions. They're the illusions and delusions of our personality. To make that passive, to make it like a character that we can play with, and to begin to become aware of what is native to ourselves, and to try to figure out how to grow our essence without being identified by our essence. Any questions? As I said right at the beginning, I've kind of not overbooked, but things are a little too fine time-wise today. So I have to end 5 minutes early, which is going to be in another 4 minutes. So not a lot of time to ask questions, but any questions? Comments?
That was a lot of information.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this for 37 years. So.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, for personality and essence, it's like we've got to tease, we've got to separate the fine from the coarse. So the personality is the coarse. It has a different weight. It's made up of World 48. It's made up of the heavier molecules. Metaphorically, we can talk about we have an Earth self, a planetary self, and we have the ability to develop a solar self. The Earth self is personality. The planetary self is essence. And then the solar self we can develop is the real I. So there's actually a heavier quality. There are differences that we can, tease out, that we can smell, that we can taste between our personality and essence. And to look and to ask yourself, to do these thought experiments, to, if I grew up differently, or if different things had happened, if I had different parents even, if I had a different family, what would be the same? I mean, there are some tremendous twin studies. Some of them are very unethical. There was a group of studies that was done with twins, and there's a documentary that was just recently made and released where these triplets, as late teenagers, early 20s, discovered they were triplets, and they were all separated as birth, adopted to different families, not told they were triplets. And this was something that was unethically done with twins. And then they were told they were part of some kind of project, and researchers would look at them to try and see what they had that was the same and what they had that was different. And that's a way of nurturing or understanding, teasing out essential features and non-essential features. So, they would have certain inclinations, certain tastes, certain foods, certain music. That was the same, and then other things that would be different. And they share the same gene, so they're genetically the same. Something to think about. At any rate, thank you guys for being here today, and next week, and take care. Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.